Yes.
We are live.
Well, good day to all of you. We are so excited to welcome you to today's program and our special guest. We are thrilled. So, I want to give a warm welcome to the Think Differently by Design Listening Tour hosts, Dina Redinger and Sharon Weinstein, co authors of the book Think Differently 18 Strategies to Fix Broken Thinking. We invite you to engage with your peers and with us as we address issues related to nurses, nursing, and the workforce. In our studies of those in leadership positions, we have found that success happens when we ask the right questions and we solve the right problems. So, our respective careers make us uniquely qualified to do this. We'll be conducting our live interviews through the end of this month, and we're very excited to welcome our special guest. I'm going to introduce her and then turn it over to Dina. Please join me in welcoming a nurse entrepreneur with 15 years of experience coaching, leading, and developing nurses. She helps to retain nurses of color, transitioning from academic to clinical settings through a proven coach leadership program that cuts costs, increases retention, isn't that what we all want? And improves health equity outcomes. Her focus is on equipping nurses of color for leadership and providing them with the tools to confidently address issues of biased care. Her services have the unmatched ability to launch nurses of color into leadership roles by using innovative coach leadership techniques. Being one of few nurse experts offering an online accredited course focused on the structural competencies of integrating racial justice into clinical practice, we are so thrilled to welcome today's guest, Nikki Akparewa. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Dina. Thank you both for having me today. Thank you. Excited to be
We're
here.
excited to have you here, and what a joy it is. It's an honor to have you. And I want to start out with this really important first question. How did you even become interested in working with nursing or working in nursing on this big issue of racial justice?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's so important for us to really be talking about racial justice and health equity. And I think as we've come to know, especially in the last couple of years, there have been more and more conversations, right, around racial justice. More organizations are really beginning to understand, especially healthcare, which is very important to understand that there is an intersection between race and health. And so my journey in this work is really sort of straightforward. I identify with the community of folks who are underrepresented, marginalized, right? So as a woman of color, and especially as a nurse of color, I have found that it's really important for me to speak on these issues and to share some of the things that are a part of my story. So for instance, as you said, I've been a nurse for 15 plus years, and the journey has not always been easy for none of us, but I think that there are unique challenges that nurses of color actually face. And I remember even going all the way back to nursing school, and I've gone to great schools, I've worked at great institutions, but even going all the way back to nursing schools, I had these experiences where I felt different and I felt as though I was sort of being isolated and individualized. And to be very honest with you, I didn't know how to handle that then. I'm a student, I'm just trying to get through. I was doing my BSN and I was just really focused on finishing school. So a lot of those concerns that I had, they were in my mind, but they weren't something that really stuck with me. But then I saw things resurfacing even as I went to work. I saw sort of the same kind of isolating incidences and places and spaces where I just didn't feel like my colleagues, especially colleagues who didn't look like me, were having the same experiences and definitely weren't being treated the way that I felt that I was being treated. And so that really solidified in my mind, we got to do better at having conversations in nursing about this. And then the final thing that really stuck out to me and really stands out is I'm a mom. I have a beautiful 8-year-old son who happens to have sickle cell. And my son has hemoglobin SC. It's a different version than SS.
Right.
But we went to his doctor's appointment when he was about, I would say, 5 months old. And, at this time, I worked at the same institution where he was receiving his care. I actually worked there. And I told the provider that I worked there. But I had made a decision that I didn't want my son to be on the recommended therapy. And the recommended therapy at the time, and perhaps even still now, was to be on penicillin for the first 5 years of his life. And it didn't sit well with me. It didn't resonate with me. So after having a conversation with my family, we decided that we were gonna stop it and see how we could manage in a different way. And when I told the provider that that's what we were going to do, his response was that had my son had hemoglobin SS, that he would have sued us for medical custody. And it got me exactly. That was my initial reaction. Whoa.
Whoa.
Whoa, right?
Oh, my heavens.
Exactly. I'd never heard that term before. I have never heard it since. But what it said to me, Sharon and Dina, was that this provider and our providers are not as aware as they may think they are. They may not be as conscious as they think they are, that biases exist. And it just made me think that if a person who is experienced, knowledgeable, I'm a healthcare, expert, if, the provider could say something like that to me, what kind of conversations were happening with other groups of people who may not have the same access, the same education, the same understanding? And so it became something that I really wanted to talk about, and I wanted to highlight and really help providers and help us as clinicians do better at having these kinds of conversations.
I'm so glad that this topic is front and center.
Yeah.
It is so, so critical. Because even when I was in school, which was before you, we had people of color in our class.
Yeah.
We even had 2 Native Americans. And we had conversations with them about the fact that they felt as if people treated them differently.
Yes. Yes.
And no one did anything about it, and no one really listened.
Yes. And
so you're exactly right.
And you know what?
So long overdue.
It's overdue, and it's been going on for a long time. And I'll tell you what else, in the work that I do with students and with, faculty and academic leaders in nursing, I'm telling you, just because it happened a long time ago, if it's not addressed, most likely it has not changed. So I'm still hearing, nursing students tell me I am feeling discrimination. I do feel like faculty don't understand what I'm saying. I go into clinical experiences and I hear things that should not be said at the nurses station, in passing, even just this week alone, I heard someone say something that sort of struck me a little bit wrong. She was talking about people living with HIV and said, oh, he's probably on isolation because he has HIV. And I was like, ooh, this is a moment for education, right? This is a moment for us to have a better understanding about how we treat people and the different types of stigma and biases that play into our conversations. And this was a nurse that said this to me, right?
But that's the same as when we used to talk about the gallbladder in bed 23 or the hysterectomy in room 101.
Yes.
People have names. These are real people.
Right.
Why are we not treating people like people?
Right. Yeah. They're not the label. Yeah, exactly.
But what I heard too, was that what you want to gift people back is the ability to have courage to speak up, because there is a real fear of speaking up, no matter what you look like.
Yes.
You know, there's still that within the health system and it's there everywhere, but giving them that courage through
Yes.
education is what I heard you say is really very powerful. So thank you for answering that question.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So back to you, Sharon.
Well, I'd really like to know, what is the process that you use to develop new nurses of color as leaders? How do
Yeah.
you allow them to feel empowered and engaged and to be part of the process and to be recognized?
Yes, that is an excellent
And
question.
do you only do that to develop the new nurses of color, or is some of that education aimed toward those who look like the rest of us?
Thank you for the way you said that too, Sharon. I appreciate that. So it's for everyone, honestly. I really do love to highlight and bring attention to nurses of color because we don't often get a lot of attention, and a lot of times things are overlooked. We become invisible in a lot of ways when we don't want to, be invisible, and become visible when we don't necessarily want to be visible. And so I like to bring attention to us and some of our challenges, but this is for everyone. This is absolutely for everyone. So the process that I use is a lot of it is around the way I coach people. Coaching is a really big part of the way that I think. It's a part of the way that I interact with folks. And so I try to think of it as a process more than anything. And coaching is really about using people's motivation, guiding them, helping them to hone in on what it is that they really need to think about. And I think when you're talking about racial justice and equity, it has to become personal, right? It cannot be somebody else's problem. And so using the framework of coaching, which is about guiding and motivating and enhancing, I think that that's a really important process. And then the other things that are really, really important when we're talking about justice and equity work is thinking about accountability and thinking about transparency. And so as I teach, and I do teach, I do workshops, I educate, I'm actually a part of my own servant leadership, and a way of giving back to the community is to work as a clinical instructor. So I actually do teach nursing students currently, and I absolutely love it. But to encourage accountability and to encourage transparency in our communication. The more we can talk about these issues in a way that is just normalized, right? We can talk about it in pre-conference, post-conference. We can bring it into the classrooms. The more we can do that, the better we're able to really have these conversations. And then that's what promotes equity. That's what really brings about that lens of this is what health equity looks like and how we can transform it. So for instance, I may take one tool. There's one tool that I really love. It's a tool around anti-oppressive frameworks, where it lists all of these really amazing things that we can do as nurses by focusing on trauma-informed approach or restorative justice or it's a human harm reduction, rather. We can focus on these things, and I bring those things into the curriculum and into the teaching space. And I bring it in and allow the students to engage in critical self-reflection, because self-reflection is, again, a part of this process of bringing in racial justice. We cannot be just, we can't be great leaders if we're not able to bring in those components of where do I fit into this process? How do I fit in? What is my positionality? What are some of the intersections that I see with my clients? Because if a client comes in or a patient comes into the hospital and they're coming in because they're hyperkalemic, right? They have a high potassium, and you say, well, they're here because they didn't get dialysis. There's one thing to say, well, they didn't get dialyzed and they should have done it, right? They're non-compliant. That's a label that we often try to affix to our patients. But the deeper question that we need to ask, the equity lens and the justice lens behind that, is why? Why are they not getting dialysis? Is this an issue because of transportation? Is that a barrier? Is it because of where they live? Are they able to get to where they need to get to? So those are the questions that I help not only students understand, but also faculty to teach these things and become confident in being able to teach them. And so it's really important for us to continue opening up these conversations. And I think a coaching approach is a really excellent way to do that and to help guide faculty and academics so they don't feel like you're trying to tell them what to do and how to do. You're there as a side-by-side, as a guide. And I think that it's an excellent way to really address racial justice and to bring in that lens as we're trying.
I love that. And I dislove or dislike the fact that we are so judgmental, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
We always have to give our opinion. We always have to, and no one cares. Really. I love your approach towards self-reflection. Dina and I use a lot of that in our Think Differently
Yeah.
process
We
during
do.
our
We
diagnostic
do.
thinking.
Yeah.
Dina, why don't you share a little bit with her?
You know, I was just writing notes furiously about how important it is that we are trying to solve the right problem. And there's always a deeper question for everybody because we're never solving the right problem 100% of the time. We're just not.
Right.
And people look at you and they're like, what? Oh, that can't be right. You know, and it's like, if you really think about it and you spend some time really searching that, but you have to have in order to have transparency and vulnerability, people have to feel safe.
Yes.
So much of the world doesn't feel safe anymore to be able to say, okay, well, you know what, to sit back and say, how am I looking at this situation, this person, this opportunity? You know, what is my impact on where we are and how am I thinking, and asking myself that deeper question, you know, am I looking through a different lens, the right lens, you know? And I think people have to give themselves the ability to do that. And I think so much of the world doesn't feel safe in doing that.
Yes.
You know, so I'd love to hear, you know, some thoughts. I know that's one of the main things we do in our groups, is trying to create that vulnerable, safe space where you're not judged. You're not, you know, we're not there to fix you because, as you said, you know, if a person comes in, right, and they've got a situation and it's a health issue, you know, you got to figure out what is that place where, you know, you didn't get that care. You know, it's so easy to point it at somebody else when essentially, you know, what is our own accountability to step into the things that we need to see that we just can't see on our own.
Right, exactly. And sometimes we need a little bit of help, and it's okay. You know, I think that's important.
Yes.
It's okay to say,
yes,
I don't really quite know what I'm doing. Can you help me out here?
Yeah.
You know,
or oops, you know, you're right.
made a mistake.
You're still right. You know, I'm really sorry. And I think there's a lot of people that, like you said, it's an education. A lot of people just can't see by themselves what they're doing.
Right.
You know, and how they're making the judgment, and some of that passive biasness that we carry. And it's all based on things that we've experienced throughout our lifetime, but also generations before us. So like you said, you know, we've got to do something to actively, you know, change that. And I love what you're doing. I think it's very, I really like this kind of that self-reflection in order to have this, even this anti-oppressive framework. I was like, really, something sparked that for me. I'm like,
oh yeah,
I'm liking
sign me
that.
up. Sign me up as well.
You know, I really am. I think that's wonderful. So
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I love that.
Absolutely.
How can we, of other, you know, people, like you said, you know, we all look different, but how can we all, regardless of what we look like, promote more of that discussion around that racial justice in our professional lives? How can we do that?
Oh my gosh, there are so many ways to do it. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like there's no right way and there's no wrong way. There's no one way either. There are so many opportunities to do this. What I can say is starting conversation is usually the hardest thing to do. So just getting started, just, you know, opening up and admitting that you don't really know where to begin. That's usually what people say to me is the hardest thing. Being afraid that they're going to offend someone is another reason why folks say, I just don't have the conversations at all. I'm afraid to do it, even not having the time, right? When I'm thinking about, you know, people that are working to put together courses or working in hospital systems, they're busy. And so they say, where is the time to do this? This is where you reach out and you look for resources. And I tell you, there are a ton of resources that are out there that are online that can help guide you. I will share with you one that I created as well. I don't know if you can see it. But it's
hold it up a little.
Yes.
Can you see that?
I saw that on your website.
I'm going to post it.
The
okay. Clinician's Guide to Microaggressions and Unconscious Bias.
Yep. And I created this workbook actually almost specifically for clinical instructors. And I mean, it's for any clinical leader, any nurse or clinical leader, but I created it almost specifically for them because they are one of those sort of paraprofessionals where they're not quite in the school and they're not quite out of it. So they don't always have a lot of support and resources. So I created this for people who just were saying, I don't know where to start. I don't feel like I have the resources and I don't need something that's really super complex, right? Because you can do very complex work, but you don't have to start at a complex level. And so for me, this is an opportunity to share with other people ways to begin acknowledging bias,
Mhm.
ways to begin recognizing it when you see it, and ways to address it. Because at this point in time, there are a lot of, and I will say, I'll speak for myself and maybe even speak for other nurses of color. We've gotten to the place where we're sort of tired of hearing the conversations around implicit bias and microaggressions. Like, we've heard them, folks are doing workshops and trying. We're asking that critical question is, what is the next action? What is it that we're going to do? And the Clinician's Guide to Microaggressions and Unconscious Bias is a great tool if you're ready to take that next step and say, I want to be able to have these kinds of conversations. I put a lot of worksheets in there, tools and tips, practical scenarios that you can pull from or you can share with other people. And you can sort of sit down at a table and just have these conversations, open up dialogue and start to have conversations. For people who are teaching this kind of content, what I would say is, or trying to learn how to teach this content, is look at what you already have, look at what you're doing, and see if there are places that you can begin to just insert more information that is about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, right? There's always opportunities. There are places anywhere to find moments and opportunities to interject this. And you don't have to create something from scratch. You don't have to build something new, right? You can find those places and spaces. And if you're the type of person that's just like, Nikki, I'm busy, I need help, that's where I come in, right?
Exactly.
I come in and say, listen, let me help you. I do a lot of work with faculty around curriculum mapping, which is really looking at their curriculum, helping them to understand places where they can make more integrated, connections to these concepts. I help nursing students and I support nursing students by allowing them to share their stories, let me know what their challenges are. So that also helps to feed back into what's going on with their faculty so they have a better understanding. And at the end of the day, like we said, Sharon, this is all about retention, right? At the end of the day, we can't spare a nurse.
We can't spare a single nurse.
We can't have nurses walking out saying, I didn't like the way I was treated, or this was a racist organization, or we can't spare these nurses. So what we really need to do is be proactive and start to really open up room and spaces to have these conversations. And I've been fortunate enough to partner with a lot of really great organizations. I've worked with Johns Hopkins University School of Nursing. I've worked at the University of Maryland. I worked at the University of Washington. I've worked at a lot of different, nonprofits. I've done all kinds of education because it's so needed. So many healthcare professionals and providers are saying, please help give us the tools and the resources so that we can do better. We know that we're not doing the best job. We know that our patients are actually suffering, right, because of our biases. Please help us so that we can open these channels of communication. And that's where I come in to help open up those channels.
2 comments. Number 1, when I talk about DE&I always add B for belonging, because people need to know that they belong.
Yes.
And secondly, I want to pick up on, you shared that you have an 8-year-old child.
I do.
I remember when my son was 8 years old, and we were in Texas at the time, and he was in school, and here was this little Jewish boy in Texas.
Okay.
And some of his, I'm not going to call them friends, some of the kids said, were you born that way?
Oh, wow.
And his comment, because he was super smart, was, it's a religion, not an affliction. Good for him. I'll never forget those words.
Yes.
I will never forget those words.
Is that your attorney son?
Yes, he's the one who, when people say, if you want to be treated properly, choose J-Dub, he treats the good and the bad the same way. He treats everyone the same way. He gives everyone respect.
That's right.
So I wanted to mention that because I think it's important. I think these are biases that that evolve within us as we're growing up.
Absolutely.
The language that we hear, the positioning that we hear, the media that we hear that is so toxic. Just the messaging is so bad.
Right.
Yes.
And we need to overcome that. And when I look at you, you're a bright light on the horizon, somebody who can help to fix the damage that's been done and put us on a path towards something that is so inclusive more
Yes.
than any of us could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yes.
together we can do it, right?
Right.
Together
And
we can
we
do this
can.
work.
And
Yeah.
then I do believe that there has to be a sisterhood and a brotherhood for people to step in when they hear things, because when people are triggered by
Yes.
certain things, sometimes it's okay to even find an ally and say, how do I address this? And maybe we start the conversation like that. I'm not sure how to address this, but
Yes.
this just struck me wrong. And I
Yeah.
just want to let you know, it just kind of hurt me. It just struck
Yes.
me. It struck me deep, And I think people have such a fear of being able to speak that language when they're triggered by something that it just grabs you, And for a lot of people, like you said, this is unraveling, centuries of wrongdoing,
Absolutely.
honestly. So it's going to take us a while.
It will take us a while.
But keep going.
I will. And
We
it
love
it
it.
will take that commitment, right? And
We
this
love
is different levels of commitment. To your point, it's personal, it's institutional, it's
Yep.
community, it's societal, and it's okay for us to start at the personal level and then to just keep, as we grasp, to keep growing and learning more. And that reminds me that I have another community I'm a part of, and I co-founded. It's called Nurse Champions for Justice. And this community is all about, we're on LinkedIn, and I can happily share more about that as well, Nurse Champions for Justice. But what we do is we come together and we talk about diversity, equity, justice, belonging. And we talk about how we as nurses see it in our lives, in our everyday lives, and how we can do better at making sure that this is a part of the conversation, that we don't shy away. And what we do in this community is we build confidence, right? We help folks understand, we normalize and we say it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not know what to say. And here I am, vulnerable as well. We are all in these places and spaces where there is a level of vulnerability. And what's beautiful about this community is that we hold each other in the light. And we support one another, and we make sure that if there's a concern or just needing to check in, hey, I think I said something that may have bothered someone. Can you give me a thought about maybe how I could, address this or work through this as a challenge? It's a great community just for having a safe space, having a safe space, especially as a nurse and as a provider. So we're not tempted to drift off and share things that may be unprofessional in a space that we shouldn't share. It's a really, really great space.
It helps to cut that rumor mill and
Yeah.
bring things to the surface, those crucial conversations you addressed that really need to be heard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just excited. I'm excited about the work that we're doing as nurses. And, I'm excited that we are entering a time, I feel like it's a revolutionary time where we are doing some really profound things. Nurses are, we're bringing to the table so much. And finally, I feel like we're starting to be noticed. We know we're compassionate, but do people know we're leaders too? Do they know all of the skills that it takes to do the work that we do? And it just feels like we're really coming into this space where more and more, not only healthcare providers, but others are starting to recognize, oh my gosh, look at all these things that nurses do. So I just want to shout you all out too, and just, say thank you for creating this space for us as nurses to.
Well, thank you. This is a renaissance. It's not a revolution. It is clearly a renaissance. This is a renaissance time.
I love it. Yes,
and we are the renaissance providers.
Yes, we are.
Well, I want to wrap up to say, thank you for your work that you're doing, because we are all with you. And, I think there was 2 words that you said, normalizing injustice, right? I mean, those are kind of powerful words to get back to people. So may we all create safe spaces for everybody to share the things that are on their hearts, on their minds. May we all learn from these things that are not obvious to any of us sometimes, right?
Exactly.
And being able to have the confidence and call it out. So thank you for your work today. We really appreciate you joining us on this journey, on this listening tour. And I'll let you close us out, Sharon.
This was a great conversation. This was a conversation that needed to be heard. And I am so excited about those who will listen to it on the replay.
Yes.
Take note of what you said and the resources that you discussed. and really act on it. This is exciting. So it's time for a close and an invitation to join us again as we welcome future guests through the rest of the month. If you'd like to participate, please reach out to us. Let us know how you'd like to give back in some way. Excuse me, I still have a cough. But in the meantime, we want to thank you for being with us.
Yes.
We certainly want to thank Nikki for being with us.
Yes.
And I am beyond thrilled that you are part of